We are slaying monsters.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
Do you want to start with the lighthouse thing?
I don't think anybody's going to know what that is.
What's the lighthouse thing?
Katie, have you seen The Lighthouse, the movie with Willem Dafoe?
No, I've definitely seen the previews for it. It looks cool, but it also looks like a psychological thriller, so I will therefore not be watching it. But it does look really cool. I love that someone made a black and white film in the 21st century. I think it's an underrated medium. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's also really cool because this is like a film nerd thing, but it's 4:3, so it's like the square frame instead of the rectangular frame.
That is cool.
So it adds to the claustrophobia because everything feels so much tighter. You know, you feel very like trapped with these two guys. But,
it's a really cool movie.
Yeah.
Matt wanted to begin with the wonderful scene of them across the table from each other going, "What?
What?
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 What? and then it like kind of erupts into some argument of some kind. But anyway, it's a wonderful for all our theater nerds out there. It's a wonderful Meisner technique.
Oh, it totally is. It's like straight out of Meisner, which is a deep theater cut.
Yeah. But anyway, it was awesome. And I was like, no, because no one's gonna know what the fuck we're doing.
But what's a Meisner technique for those who don't know?
Meisner. So Meisner. There's a whole bunch of schools that acting techniques, right? And Meisner was one of them. So Stanislavski is the one that everybody sort of knows and calls method, but method is sort of a catch-all term too. Like method has become kind of meaningless at this point. It's almost like Kleenex, you know, like it just doesn't, it encompasses a whole bunch of stuff because in a way, method includes Stanislavski and Meisner and Stella Adler's technique. And anyway, so Meisner itself was a technique developed by Sanford Meisner that used the principle of living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. So basically, Meisner said, if you have to play let's say a serial killer, right? Obviously, you can't go out and have the true experience of being a serial killer. Not possible, you know? But what you can do is give yourself an imaginary circumstance of being a serial killer. And maybe to get that emotion, you go to a place of like breaking a vase that your mother had and really appreciated or something. It doesn't matter what if you're doing the actual true thing, all that matters is that you're able to direct yourself emotionally to that place. And that's the imaginary circumstance. So you use an imaginary circumstance to put yourself in the emotional place. But the other thing is that you unlock your emotions through repetition. And so the like quintessential Meisner technique is to sit down with somebody, make an observation about them. Like EJ, you're wearing a red shirt. So I would say red shirt. And then red shirt.
Red shirt.
Red shirt. And it repeats back and forth. And then once the words become meaningless, you start having a conversation and the words don't matter. And that's sort of the way you present a script, right? Because you're not presenting words, you're presenting emotion.
Yeah. And red shirt's a very basic thing. I mean, a lot of the times it's kind of like, I'm sad. And then
and then I say, you're sad.
Don't you say I'm sad?
No, I say
you're sad?
I say you're sad. Yeah,
I'm
sad.
In
response.
And that really gets gets you going. So it's a very powerful technique. It was how Matt and I actually kind of connected for the first time and became friends and partners in the Meisner technique. And our teacher was directly taught by Meisner himself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and he was like really big into that, and he was a really important part of that, of teaching that and proliferating it.
He was amazing.
We had the best teacher you could have, I think, for it.
Yeah. He also found Jack Nicholson. He was the guy who gave Jack Nicholson his first acting gig.
On Star Trek.
Yeah, on Star Trek.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. I did not know that. That's a fun story.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's a great guy.
Back to lighthouses, I will say, because, because I think if I remember from the lighthouse, they're like in a tower lighthouse, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
So in the research for today, I was reading about Bell Rock, which is this tower lighthouse. I think they're called like sea-washed lighthouses that is off the coast of Scotland. It's 11 miles off the coast of Scotland. And it's literally just a tower on a rock that gets submerged by the ocean twice a day, at least with the tides, but like could be more. I wasn't quite sure. And so like when you're a light keeper at one of those places, like you can't really go outside. Like maybe a little bit from during the day, there's like a little sliver of space around the tower, but mostly you're just in the tower. That's the only space you have. And I was like, wow, you really have to have a certain mindset. And I could see where you might go a little bit, you might have strong emotions. If you lived in a place like that.
You go a little Meisner technique on
a little bit.
Yeah.
And you're there for months too, you know? A lot of these guys were there for multiple months, at least like weeks. Just even if you can go outside, man, it's not like you have that far to walk. They're not put on gigantic stretches of land. They're these tiny little islands, you know? And it's dangerous to go to a lot of the cliff sides and stuff too.
Oh, why are we talking about this? Well, we are slaying monsters. We got Maddie J.
Yo.
We got Katie.
Hi.
And I'm EJ, and we are going to dig into this amazing series about lighthouses, but not just lighthouses.
Not just lighthouses, but the disappearance of the lighthouse keepers of the Flannan Islands. This is really, really cool. And this all started for me because when I was a kid, my parents loved listening to old radio stories, all that old-time radio. And one that will always stick in my head is the story Three Skeleton Key on the Suspense radio show, voiced by Vincent Price. And in that story, there was a trio of lighthouse keepers on this remote island that were attacked by an army of rats, which swarmed the lighthouse and drove them mad as they slowly starved. And I thought this story was so cool. It was based on a short story by George Gustave Toulouse from 1927. And I was so surprised to learn that story, you know, this tale of isolation and insanity on this barren seascape, was closer to reality than I thought. Because on a chilly December day in 1900, a lighthouse on the Flannan Islands of Scotland was found deserted. The three keepers who had been living there were gone, leaving no trace behind but an overturned chair and plates of uneaten food. Their bodies were never found. In the intervening century, the story of these missing keepers of the Flannan Island Lighthouse has become rife with speculation and mystery. What happened to these guys, and what sinister or catastrophic event led to one of the most fascinating disappearances in history? And this went on to inspire certainly Three Skeleton Key, the story that I became obsessed with, and even, as we quoted earlier in the episode, The Lighthouse. It was also adapted, like directly adapted into a movie called The Keepers with Gerald Butler.
I also think I read that a movie called The Vanishing also
maybe it's The Vanishing.
I read that.
It might be The Vanishing, not The Keepers.
I think it's The Vanishing because I was reading the National Lighthouse Board of Scotland's website, and when you go to the Flannan Islands Lighthouse, it's very just the facts, ma'am, but they say like they disappeared, and there's a movie called The Vanishing that is inspired, that tells the story or is inspired by it.
Yeah, The Vanishing, I think, I haven't seen The Vanishing, I've only seen The Lighthouse. I think that The Vanishing is a little bit more speculative. So is the lighthouse as well. But I don't know that there's been a true, like, factual adaptation of what happened. Because honestly, we still don't know. You know, we're going to give some suggestions throughout the course of this. Some of them are weird. Some of them are not. Some of them are a bit more realistic. But we really have no way of knowing what happened in that December of 1900.
Yeah. It's sorry, I just was looking it up so that we can actually say Be correct. Yes. It's not the National Lighthouse Board. It's the Northern Lighthouse Board. That's the name of the board in Scotland. And the Flannan Isles, it's The Vanishing, and it's a film from 2018, because there's another vanishing film from the 80s that is not it, because I Googled it and I was like, this is not what we're looking at.
There's no lighthouses here.
No. So, yes, the Northern Lighthouse Board. Is called The Vanishing. It's from 2018.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, my primary source for this series will be The Lighthouse, The Mystery of the Eilean Mor Lighthouse Keepers by Keith McCloskey. And we're going to start this story 1,600 miles from Scotland, off the coast of the Azores, because that is where the most famous ghost ship was found. The Mary Celeste was an abandoned brigantine found adrift in 1872. She had left New York, bound for Genoa, Italy, but was discovered 8 days after her launch in the Azores. That's an archipelago in the middle of the Atlantic. The captain that found her, who was captaining the D.I. Gracia, spotted the Mary Celeste drifting and assumed that she had run into some kind of trouble. So he dispatched a boarding party, but they found the entire ship deserted. And stranger still, her cargo was intact and untouched, which ruled out pirates, which is what you immediately think when you find a ship with no crew, right? The crew's belongings were still in their bunks. There was a 6-month supply of food and water. Everything was normal, basically. It's just everybody was gone. Now, there was a lifeboat missing, and they found that her pumps had been disassembled. And below deck, they found that she'd taken a couple feet of water, but not enough to sink her, obviously, and everything else was normal. The last entry in her logbook detailed 2 weeks of bad weather, but nothing else amiss. There were no signs of struggle. There's no blood stains on the deck, no weapons, no mutiny, no catastrophe to be found anywhere. In fact, she was in such good shape that the crew of the D.I. Gracia boarded her and sailed the Mary Celeste back into port. And when they got there, they were immediately put under suspicion of piracy, claiming that they were the ones who killed the crew and they were trying to bring her cargo back.
Wow.
Because nobody could understand why a captain would abandon his ship if it was in good working condition. They hadn't run out of supplies. Everything was okay.
Do they have any ideas as to what happened?
Yes. Yeah, we'll get to that in just a second. Yeah.
I was going to say, I read a couple things.
The D.I. Gracia's crew was eventually exonerated. But the mystery of that ghost ship maintained. And some people started saying, well, maybe it was a mutiny that went wrong. Others said, maybe it was piracy that didn't go as planned. Other people said weather phenomena. They talked about water spouts. Maybe she got becalmed somewhere. Some even claimed that the ship was attacked by sea monsters, which devoured all the men, or like a giant octopus that dragged them under. And then, of course, in more recent times, we have had reports that all the men got scooped up by aliens, kind of like early maritime Allagash abductions. Mm-hmm. An article in the Gibraltar Gazette from 1874 details the mystery.
In the utter absence of a clue or grain of evidence, it is to be feared that the fate of the crew of the Marie Celeste, is it the Mary Celeste, though?
Oh, I'd say Mary Celeste, but I guess it is Marie Celeste.
Yeah.
Marie Celeste.
The crew of the Marie Celeste will be added to those numerous mysteries of the deep, which will never be solved until the great day when the sea shall give up its dead. If crime has been committed, as is much to be suspected, there is little hope of bringing the perpetrators to justice.
Yeah. We need better newspaper writing. More people would read the news if it sounded like that.
Yeah, beautiful sentences.
Write that, AI.
Yeah.
So the most reasonable explanation of what happened here, I think, comes from two different researchers. First, Annie McGregor believes that the captain got lost at some point during the 2 weeks of storms that were detailed in his logbook, and probably changed course for the Azores to get his bearings. Because once he found someplace that he knew where he was, he could then figure out where he needed to go. Now, during that time, McGregor believes that the pumps malfunctioned, which explains why the crew disassembled them and why there was some water in the hold. They didn't know where they were, and the pumps, they weren't sure if they could get them back together and continue the trip. McGregor believes that the captain ordered the ship abandoned for the safety of the crew, because he was worried that she was going to take on more water. She ultimately didn't, but he had no way of knowing that.
And I also think that she said that even though he wasn't quite sure where he was, under this theory that what she thinks happened, where she thinks he did order them to abandon the ship, it was they could see land at the time. And where the ship was found, it had floated of its own accord out to where it was found. But at the moment, it was closer to one of the Azores and they could see land. Because that was the other thing, is like no captain would tell their crew to abandon the ship in the middle of the sea. So that was another piece of it that I thought was interesting too.
Yeah, that there was now a place that they could get to, right?
Right, yeah.
What's weird is that that's an evolving plan, right? There would be first, the pumps malfunctioned. We're thinking of abandoning ship, all of this stuff. It wouldn't have been under a duress or catastrophe. So it seems like that should have been in his logbook. That's exactly the kind of thing that you would put as a final entry. Hey, pumps are bad. We see land, gonna head there. Because, you want to be rescued, right? Yeah. But that's not in the logbook. So something else probably happened. In 2006, the University College of London chemistry professor, Andrea Sella, put forth a more catastrophic theory. He believes that the Mary Celeste's cargo, which was industrial alcohol, may have started leaking in the hold. And that would mean that there was a buildup of flammable gas, which could have easily been ignited by a crew member's pipe or cigar or, just any rogue spark. In simulations, Sella found that a fireball would ignite all of those gases and then travel upward through the hatches. But because it was only igniting the gases and not actual flammable material, the fire burned out really quick, leaving everything in the cargo hold completely intact. And so imagine you're the captain, right? You're traveling along. It's just maybe you've had some pump issues and you're having your crew disassemble the pump and clean it. And then all of a sudden you see a fucking fireball burst out of the hold of your ship. I don't think it's wild speculation to say that you might abandon ship at that point.
And then as you're floating away on your little boat, you're looking back and you're like, that thing could blow any second.
Right.
Even though nothing's happening, they probably didn't want to return to it because they were worried.
And you're carrying alcohol in the hold. Yeah. Alcohol's flammable. You don't know what's going on down there. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that I read that McGregor said was that when the ship was found, apparently the hatch was in place. So that's why she thinks it wasn't the alcohol situation, because if that had happened, the hatch would have blown or moved or been open in some way. And apparently it was not when the ship was found. So I don't know what a hatch on a ship in the when was it? Sorry, it was the 1800s?
The late 1800s,
yeah.
1874.
So perhaps it didn't come all the way off. Perhaps it was on a hinge, so maybe it did blow open and fell back shut again. I don't know. But I thought that was interesting just to like keep the mystery alive, that when they found it, like the hatches were closed. So it kind of makes, in her opinion, it makes the chemistry explanation, which I think makes a lot of sense, a little bit. It's like one thing notch against it. The other thing, Matt, that you didn't say, or maybe you were about to say, is that in the cargo hold, all of the boxes were full except for like 6 or 9 boxes that were empty. And those 6 or 9 boxes were made of a more porous wood. And so the chemists think that what was happening was those boxes were the ones that were leaking, caused the explosion. Yes. But also that's why there were these empty ones and these full ones, because the empty ones they just leaked out during the passage.
Yes, exactly. There were 1,700. I read barrels.
Yeah, barrels.
Boxes, but 1,700 barrels of denatured alcohol, and there were 7, I believe, that were found empty. So that seems to support the theory, the chemistry theory. The hatch thing is really interesting. That the hatch didn't. I mean, and I don't know brigantines well enough to know if the hatch like pops open, pops back closed, or if it was maybe it was enough to send the fireball out. Maybe the fireball just sort of ran through the hold of the ship and people escaped it and said, "Oh my God, there's a fire down below." I don't know, but yeah, it also, the chemistry explanation, this burning fumes, it doesn't explain the disassembled pump either. But a lot of times I think these things don't necessarily need to correlate. A lot of times there are just sort of confounding factors that aren't really related to each other that now end up being part of the mystery. The pump could have needed repair, and there could have been a fireball, and they had to escape the ship.
Yeah. You were saying, Matt, I mean, it seems that they would have mentioned that they needed to repair the pump in the ship's log, and they didn't, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, and so that's sort of, I don't, like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's possible that someone else found the Marie Celeste and needed a part from the pump, from their pump, for their ship's pump, and disassembled the pump to try to get that. I don't know. It's odd. It could have just been a routine cleaning that he didn't feel like he needed to log in the captain's journal. I don't know.
I would think that if somebody went onto the ship, they would have taken more than the pump parts, though.
You would think so. Or taken the whole ship back. Because that was the thing. At the time, if you found a derelict ship and you brought it back to port, you could claim all of that cargo and get money for it.
Yeah, it was like an insurance thing. Like the ships were insured. So if you brought the ship back, the insurance company would give you money for like returning the ship to them instead of it being a total loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the story of this ghost ship was retold in fiction by Arthur Conan Doyle in 1884. Now, in his version, a pair of African crew members staged a mutiny and murdered everybody on board except for the narrator because he had a stone that the mutineers believed possessed a strange power. Doyle published this story anonymously, thinking it was just a funny, if slightly racist, bit of sensationalized fiction. But Doyle's account quickly got mixed up with the true fiction of the Marie Celeste and embellishments like uneaten meals on the table and the sails set for travel. Things that were in his story became facts instead of, sort of fictional story elements. And then there were these metaphysical elements like the blessed stone, which the mutineers worshipped, that further tied it to this supernatural mystery. It wasn't just a commonplace disappearance. There was now something else greater, more Fortean going on. This went so far that Doyle was actually questioned during the inquest about the fate of the ship. with the commissioner wondering if he had written any truth in his story or had any insider information as to what happened.
That's some real method writing right there. Like, Doyle went out to the ship, got everybody off it somehow through his charm, his writerly charm. And I don't know.
Well, it's also one of the things that we laugh about all the time because it's like somebody believed that Doyle could not have come up with all of this on his own. Like, as a fiction writer, as a not only a fiction writer but a detective fiction writer.
I know.
Yeah.
You know, they were like, well, you obviously must be in contact with one of the survivors, right?
Yeah. Or he caused it himself by doing a deal with the great squid, the giant squid or something. Yeah.
I also find it I find it very funny when people who don't have an imagination are like, you couldn't possibly have made this up. It's like, what are you talking about? Have you ever talked to a child?
Yeah.
They make up crazy shit.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating to me, actually, how, like, we all have these incredibly vivid imaginations as children, and then some of us just divert from that and lose that, and then have a really hard time believing that people could be lying about alien abductions and other things like that and crazy shit. It's like, nah, man, don't you remember when you were 5 and you said that, you know, you were part dragon? Do you remember that?
Yeah. And it came so easily.
Yeah.
Like, you would just be like, okay, now this is a whole cotton candy colored forest and we're going through it.
Yeah.
And you were just like, it made total sense. And you were like, okay. And we are sticky gumdrops. That's what we look like. We're human beings made of candy. Like,
yay! That sounds fun, Katie. I'm glad you haven't lost that amazing imagination of yours.
I don't let myself use it enough, quite frankly.
You should use it more.
I know. We need more absurdism.
Yeah.
We'll get a little absurdism in a little bit.
All right.
Great. Let's do it.
So these kinds of nautical disasters were very popular for generations. You know, piloting a ship was already fraught with dangers from storms, pirates, mutiny, and of course, sea monsters, right? Never mind the very real consequences of like drifting too close to a rocky coast, damaging your hull, running aground. Which brings us to our next location, the Outer Hebrides, an island chain off the west coast of Scotland. Now, these islands form something of a northwestern barrier to the mainland, consisting of Lewis and Harris Islands to the north, then North Uist, Benbecula, South Uist, and finally Barra. Struggling through the Scottish pronunciations here. The largest of these, and also the easiest to pronounce, Lewis and Harris, are actually the same landmass, divided not by water, but by a string of mountains.
That sounds beautiful.
They really are. If you look at the pictures, they're like gorgeous.
Oh my God.
All of these are kind of crisscrossed by waterways that transform them into archipelagos. In total, the Outer Hebrides is made up of about 35 islands, all in various stages of habitation. The first people to settle there were the ancient Norse, although there's evidence of civilization that dates back all the way to 2900 BCE. Lewis Island is home to the Callanish stones, which is a Stonehenge built between 2900 and 2600 BCE. There was a tomb that was constructed within this henge, and archaeologists found a cache of pottery sherds inside. We still don't know what the purpose of that henge is, although, like most similar henges, it's believed to be an observatory. Now, the islands of Lewis and Harris were originally inhabited by a group of monks under the order of St. Flannan. They sought out this area because it was remote, but also tranquil and beautiful, so it was the perfect place for them to go and meditate and try to connect and commune with their god. After that sect dissolved, shepherds stayed there and used the islands as a place for their sheep to graze.
I'm looking up the Callanish stones. Wow, they're really cool.
They look like Stonehenge. Yeah, I mean they are.
Yeah,
absolutely like.
It's like a little bit more rustic than Stonehenge. Like Stonehenge is quite orderly.
Yes.
And the stones are like all different shapes and things. It's very.
I think there's
cool,
more of them too, like more stones than Stonehenge.
Yeah, it does look like you were saying, like an observation. Like it has that sort of clock aspect to it.
Yeah, I don't know enough about like ancient astronomy to be able to tell you exactly how that factors into the observational points of astrological bodies and stuff. But yeah, it seems like that's what it was used for.
The aerial view is really interesting. It almost looks like a person. Almost looks like a human body. But that's just my brain seeing patterns, I think.
Yeah, the lines that like go out from the sides. It's really interesting. I didn't even notice that these were there. So cool. Learning something new.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like really cool history about that area. Now, despite the very tranquil appearance of these islands, that area was extremely dangerous for passing ships. There were, as Keith McCloskey describes it, an appalling number of shipwrecks along the Scottish coast prior to the 1630s. Now, that's due to a combination of rocky shoreline, the danger of the North Atlantic storms, and the thick fog that blanketed the Outer Hebrides, which the Scottish called it har, likely after the Norse word hor, like hoarfrost.
Oh, cool.
After thousands of shipwrecks along that coastline, James Maxwell built the first lighthouse in Scotland on the Isle of May. Constructed under a patent issued by Charles I, this lighthouse was really, primitive lighthouse. It was a tower with a coal fire on top of it. But it served its purpose, and it paved the way for the establishment of the Northern Lighthouse Board in 1782. The board was granted the power to purchase land and construct lighthouses on it, and they spent the next 100 or so years transforming the rocky coastline by just dotting little lighthouses all along it. The real advancement, however, came from one man, Robert Stephenson. He was the stepson of a civil engineer, and he constructed his first lighthouse in 1791 at the age of 19. 19, guys.
Man, I was thinking, kids were different back then.
They really were.
When I was 19, I was leaving my dorm to go across the street in my bathrobe and get fried chicken. That was my experience at 19, and this guy was building a lighthouse.
Yeah, I think I have so many theories about why people were like so much more accomplished, or some people were so much more accomplished back in the day. There are still really accomplished young people now, of course, too. But I think, one, we didn't have any passive entertainment. We've talked about this before on the podcast. There's no cell phone, TV, anything. Like, basically, if you weren't working or walking around, you were reading. Like, that was all you had. Like, that was all you could do. There wasn't even music. Like, maybe if you played music, you could do that. Like, if you had a piano or something. So they read a lot. But I also think, like, people considered you an adult, basically, at, like, 14, 16. I don't know. I read a biography of John Adams. He, like, sent his son off to be, like, a secretary to a diplomat at, like, 14.
My God.
And I was like, oh, okay. We shouldn't beat ourselves up, is what I'm saying.
And
you're right.
And also, he was the stepson of a civil engineer. So he was probably interning under this guy. He probably learned a lot of the trade. Well, I know for a fact that he worked with his stepfather, and they innovated a bunch of the lighthouses, and they replaced like the coal-fired lights with oil, and they replaced them. Ultimately, they got to gas and paraffin too. The lighthouse we're going to talk about is a paraffin-fired lighthouse. And they like renovated the glass and changed the way the glass was constructed so it better shone the light and stuff like that. But anyway, lighthouses became the family business, and Robert Stevenson passed his enterprise to his sons, Alan, David, and Thomas. Now, Thomas's own son was Robert Lewis, who was slated to take over the business but wanted to be a writer instead.
Too bad it didn't work out for him.
Yeah, I know. It's a shame, right? Should have been an engineer.
Yeah.
And we all know this. Given his background, sea travel, all that stuff, he went on to write Treasure Island, Robert Louis Stevenson.
But without him, we wouldn't have Black Sails.
It's true.
That beautiful show on
Great
Showtime. So, thank you, Robert Louis Stevenson.
Now, David Allen Stevenson, Robert the author's cousin, followed in the family footsteps, studied engineering at the University of Edinburgh, and graduated in 1875. He was the one who was tasked with building the lighthouse along the coast of the Outer Hebrides in the 1890s. And after scouting the region, he decided on the Flannan Islands as the ideal location for this light. It's a small, rocky archipelago 20 miles west of Lewis. So if you put the light there, he reasoned that would make it clearly visible for anyone traveling what was called the North About Passage, so going around the northern tip of Scotland. His proposal would take 3 seasons to construct and set the Northern Lighthouse Board back about 1,900 pounds. He noted the challenges of moving building materials to this tiny island and wrote,
"The landing of materials will obviously be attended with considerable difficulty, for there is little protection from the Atlantic swell, which is seldom at rest."
If there's one thing Scottish lighthouse designers understood, it was the threat of tidal waves. David Allen's father, David Stevenson, published a paper in 1852 where he attempted to mathematically calculate the height of waves based around their distance from the shore. He was thinking that we could use this information to determine where you build the lighthouses, how strong they need to be, how tall they need to be, because if you got a big wave and it flew into the top of the lighthouse, it could actually go all the way down the lighthouse and flood the lighthouse tower, which is horrifying, right?
I didn't think about that. I was just thinking, it would extinguish the light, break the glass. It would be a big... I didn't even think it would fill the whole tower with water.
Because they're basically water sealed. So there was all this mathematical calculation that he tried to do to figure out the most optimum height, integrity, location, all of these things for the lighthouse. Now, what's fascinating, especially considering what is eventually going to happen here, is that his estimations were considered extremely conservative and that he failed to take into account wind speed in his calculations, particularly strong gusts of wind over 30 miles per hour and how much they could affect tidal waves. Now, the Flannan Island Lighthouse was first lit on December 7th, 1899, although work continued throughout the first 3 seasons of 1900. If you were to set an approximate date that the project was finalized, it would be October of 1900, which is about 2 months before the disappearances. Even more unsettling is it's almost a prescient notion from Stevenson. On December 6th, 1900, less than 2 weeks before the disappearance, he noted that he had had conversations about installing a wireless telegraph that would facilitate communication from the lighthouse to the mainland. But it would take 20 years before that wireless communication was actually set up. Those lighthouse keepers who are in that lighthouse, they have no way of communicating with the mainland. I mean, they have the light, obviously, but they're 20 miles west, and there's nothing. You're there, you're stranded.
Time to bring back the carrier pigeon.
It's very stormy out there. And yes, our technologies are quite resilient now. Like a lot of the lines would go undersea or whatever, like on the seabed. But if something goes out, the electricity goes out. If something goes awry, like you're stuck. Obviously, no one mans that lighthouse anymore. But I'm just saying, even in today's very connected world. Like, things can happen.
Yeah, and I mean, there's still a lot of debate over, even if they had, some type of wireless communication, would they have been able to communicate? Or was it a type of incident where nobody knew how bad it was until it was too bad to even call for help? We don't really know. There was someone on the mainland whose job it was to look out and make sure the light was lit. But that was literally their whole job. Like, they weren't looking for people. They weren't looking for distress or anything like that. They were just like, is the light lit? Cool. Okay. I don't need to worry about it.
Did these guys have like a boat that they dragged into the lighthouse, could push back out and get themselves off the island if they needed to?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. They had a boat. They had life preservers, those sorts of things. But, if it is a storm, and it was a very stormy time, we'll get into that shortly here, but there was a big storm at the time, and you don't really want to be in a 3-4 person boat in the middle of an ocean that's throwing up like 100-foot waves.
No, I would definitely wait till it was nicer out, but
yeah, the North Atlantic, no thank you.
Yeah.
No thank you.
So the Flannan Island Lighthouse was situated on a high cliff overlooking the water. There is a stone retaining wall that surrounds the lighthouse itself, and it looks almost like a castle with a fortification around it. The light is 23 meters or 75 feet high, ran on paraffin, and consumed 20 barrels a year. The keeper's apartment was attached to the lighthouse tower, and it's this little squat 2-room building. There's a combined kitchen and living space, and then a separate sleeping quarters. There's a long winding path from the lighthouse that branches, connecting the east and west landings. And that path was fitted with rail tracks because there was a cable car, like a trolley, that carried supplies. So they didn't have to schlep everything from the landings back to the lighthouse. The east landing was the steeper of the two, but it was also closer in proximity to the lighthouse. But the west landing was a more gradual slope, and so they used that one more. And they actually built a crane on the west landing to unload construction supplies initially, and then they used it to unload regular supplies. You just pluck them up off the ship, put them on the land. At the west landing, there's also an inlet that cuts really deep into the island's coastline, and during particularly heavy storms, the waves would surge into this narrow crevice and break on the high cliffs, splash up in the air. And so they could, from where they were in the lighthouse, they could actually look and see how bad the storm was by how high these waves were breaking. If anyone has ever been to Acadia in Maine, it's essentially Thunder Hole.
Made me think of that.
Yeah, it's this sea cave, and you see and there's a roar to it too. The sea just comes in and poof, and sprays up in the air.
Even on like perfectly nice days.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. I mean, I think that's useful, right? It's like, oh, is the sea making it into the inlet? Okay, it's gotten bad out there. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's actually dependent on the tide. Thunder Hole is.
Yes.
But in really bad weather, it's like, it's got to be crazy. I don't think I've been there for bad weather, but
it sounds like thunder.
Yeah.
That's why it's called Thunder Hole. There were 3 men working at the Flannan Island Lighthouse, with a 4th serving as like a rotating replacement in case somebody got sick or injured. Each man was expected to serve for at least a month at a time, at which point he could go to the shore for leave. The principal lighthouse keeper and the man in charge was James Ducat. Now, he had been a lighthouse keeper for 22 years, and that tenure meant that he had been traveling all around Scotland, all various lighthouses in the region. And so he had seniority, and he was considered that's considered the most important qualification amongst the keepers, the seniority. He was the one who would be scheduling their watches, keeping the logs, writing up duty rosters, and he was also in charge of all the operational stuff like upkeep, cleaning, painting, provisions, at least delegating all of those things. They were coordinated with the assistants and performed up until lunchtime. Painting and repair were like the major things that you did because, you know, you're out there in the sea air, you're constantly getting hit by waves and things, so there's always shit that you have to do and maintain and stuff. Ducat's second in command was Thomas Marshall, the second assistant lighthouse keeper. Now, he had only been there for 4 years, and the Flannan Islands was only his second post. Marshall and the other assistant lighthouse keeper would switch off cook duty, and so they would prepare their meals, which were mostly salted meat and dried peas and lentils. Delicious. They had no electricity, only coal-fired ovens. Marshall was technically supposed to be the third in command, but the first assistant lighthouse keeper, William Ross, had been injured, and so he had been swapped out with Thomas. Ross's replacement was the occasional lighthouse keeper, Donald MacArthur. And he was a tailor who served for just a month on lighthouse duty so far. So he's very fresh. He was also known for his quick temper, which I'm sure was a absolute delight to have in a tiny little lighthouse on a rocky island for weeks at a time.
Oh, God.
They're like, dude, get it together.
Yeah.
They're like, go take a walk, several laps around the island, then you can come back.
Their shifts were 4 hours on, 8 hours off. The responsibility of lighting the light fell to whoever was on duty at sunset, and it would be extinguished by whoever's duty covered sunrise. The lights were a series of lenses which had to be hand cranked by a giant, it's almost like a big wind-up music box, and you had to hand crank it. It would run for like 30 to 60 minutes, and then you had to crank it again.
Wow.
Which is what they did in the lighthouse.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the light is on 24 hours a day, not just, no, it's only on at night. At sunset, you said that. At sunset, yep. And then sunrise, it goes out again. Okay. But did their shifts, so the night shift was the 4 hours on, 8 hours off, or like even during the day, they would get, like they were just constantly...
They were constantly on duty, but they would... The night shift was split. So it was 4 hours from sunset to middle of the night. Then you would wake up the next guy in the middle of the night. He would get up, he would man the light for about 4 hours till sunrise. And then he would wake up the next guy, and it would go like that.
There was something creepy in the movie about the timer going off and them having to go and crank it back up again.
Yep.
I don't know. There's just something freaky about that to me.
And you don't really have much to do during that time. Like you crank it, you leave, you get probably like 45 minutes to yourself to just like do whatever. And then you got to go back up and crank it again.
Yeah. But like it's plunged to darkness.
Yes.
And then you have to go and get the light back on. And that's scary because it's like, bam, dark.
You'd think that they would go up there before it went off and then crank it. Might. I don't know.
They should.
But they probably didn't. Yeah.
I suspect that there were probably also times where you like crank it, fall asleep, wake up, say, oh shit, it's off, run up, crank it again. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like during the winter, which in Scotland is like, it gets dark at like 3 p.m. So you're talking like during the summer, those night shifts are probably less bad. But in the winter, I mean, you've got probably multiple shifts because you're probably turning that thing on at like 3. And then it's like the first shift is over at 7. You're not even into true nighttime yet, really. Right. Like, you know.
Now, as you can expect from a couple of guys living in close proximity for months at a time, things could get heated. But they could
also... Like heated rivalry?
Yes. They would be heated rivalry.
I smell a new romance series.
I do probably. Too. The romance of the night of the lighthouse keepers.
Yeah. I'm sure that exists.
Oh, I'm sure it existed if it doesn't exist in a novel.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things that they used to do to occupy themselves was play pranks on each other. So that they might steal or hide each other's belongings. They might cook meals that they knew the other people didn't like.
Oh, not for MacArthur, though. Don't do that to him. I'll flip the fuck out on you.
Yeah, there was one story that I read. It wasn't about these keepers, but about keepers in another lighthouse where the one guy didn't like, I think, peas. And so they made him peas for like 2 weeks in a row and nothing else. There was also one account. I love this. So there was an inspector who would come out and, these are people just from the NLB who would make sure that everything's in working order. And they would also write up citations if you would fuck something up. Well, apparently this guy was the type of person who spent a lot of time in the bathroom. And so to play a prank on this inspector, who they didn't like very much, the keepers took one of their uniforms, they filled it with like cloth and straw and stuff, so they made a dummy. And they set the dummy in the bathroom and then locked the door and crawled out through a window. So they set it up like the bathroom was occupied. This guy showed up, tried to get in the bathroom, couldn't get in the bathroom, and had to repeatedly relieve himself outside until he realized that it was a prank. Apparently that dummy ended up being sort of a mascot for that lighthouse and sat on their wharf for a couple of years too.
Oh, I love that.
That's cute.
What if the lighthouse guys disappeared because they pulled a prank on the people coming to check on them by just hiding down below somewhere where it was like kind of sketchy, but they knew they could get there and get out. But then the tide came in and they couldn't get out and they got trapped and then they died.
That's not a theory that anyone has postulated before, as far as I know, but it's maybe.
Could have been a prank.
Well, it's all fun and game until someone loses an eye or their life.
That's right.
Or loses 3 keepers.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, though. I don't think someone came to check on them. So why would they have hidden? But
yeah, that
nobody
is true.
checked on them?
No. Well, yeah, we'll get into it here in just a sec. Yeah. Let's talk before we do. Let's talk about the dangers of all of this shit, right? Because you're isolated. Help is miles away on the mainland. So, like, there was one instance in the Chicken Rock Lighthouse that the coal-fired stove got out of control and burned down their living quarters, and so the keepers fled, and they were found huddled on the rocks. I think the next day, luckily, there was a shipment coming in, but otherwise they might have died from exposure. And storms could get really bad, so you had to just stay inside and there was very little that you could do except wait for them to pass. There was a particularly strong storm in 1899, which completely destroyed the Flannan Islands West Landing Pier and washed their supply crane out to sea. And so a new pier had to be built and a second crane was installed. This one was now 70 feet in the air, about the same height as the lighthouse.
That's crazy because that means, like, you just told us that this lighthouse was built in like a year. So having the West Landing Pier destroyed, that's like the first year that it exists. You already lost your pier and had to put a new one up.
Yes. Yeah.
That's like wild.
Wow.
Yeah, within the and to specify that even more, within the first year, they got a storm that had waves so high, like higher than they estimated them to be, so high that they washed away the crane. This new crane that they installed was very costly and was really a sticking point for the NLB, and they made it abundantly clear that crane was to be kept in good working order because they really didn't want to pay for another one.
Sounds about right.
So all of this brings us to the strange events of 1900 and the disappearance of the Flannan Island keepers. The first indication that something was wrong was the night of December 15th, 1900. The SS Arctur, the massive cargo ship, was approaching the Flannan Islands that night. Now, she had launched from Philadelphia and was bound for Leith, which is a port near Edinburgh. And en route, she sailed through a very nasty storm, which actually swept one of her 4 compasses overboard. By midnight, they'd come out of that storm, but the sea was still incredibly choppy. And as they approached the Hebrides, Captain Holman became very concerned because he knew this region well. He was sort of familiar with the coast. He knew it was dangerous there. And he was relying on the new Flannan Island Lighthouse to guide him around it. But he couldn't see the light. There was nothing. And the more they looked, the more they just saw darkness. And so he altered his course and said, we're going to veer well around these rocks. Luckily, he knew where he was going. And he noted the absence of the light in his log so he could report it to the NLB. 3 days later, the Arctur landed and he reported the dark lighthouse. At this point, everybody just kind of assumed that it was a malfunction, not a big problem. And so the NLB said, we're going to look into the matter. We'll dispatch a ship to the Flannan Islands. But then suddenly another storm rolled in. And gale force winds pummeled Scotland's west coast, forced all of the ships to remain in port for 4 more days. The weather finally cleared on December 21st, and the NLB instructed one of their supply ships, the Hesperus, to check in on the Flannan Islands on their next route.
What's up with that one guy whose one job is to keep looking at the lighthouses to make sure the lights are on?
So this is a little side note. That guy did not report the dark light the way he should have.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean the way he should have? Like he just didn't report it?
He just didn't report it. Yeah, he was supposed to check in on it periodically. He didn't need to check every night, but he was supposed to check in periodically as kind of a fail-safe, and he didn't report it.
Well, if he didn't have to check every night, maybe that was just one of the nights he didn't check.
And then the other thing that sort of confounded all of this was Christmas, because there were a bunch of like work shutdowns and things.
I was going to say
Christmas.
He's at a Christmas party.
Exactly, right? Yeah.
He was like, I'll worry about this later. It's also possible. I mean, we don't know. Obviously, we don't know at all. But it's also possible. We talked about the sunset really early. It's possible he was like, I'm going to a Christmas party. And he like looked out and it was on. And then whatever happened. It went out. And when the captain got there, it wasn't on. But it's possible that the guy did check and it was on. But would he have made a log either way or no? He just had to check if it was on. And if it was on, he didn't do anything.
I don't know if he had to make a log either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He would have certainly reported if there was something amiss.
Right.
But also, I don't think, because the light would, you would crank it, it would turn, it would go out, you would have to crank it again, right? So you also would need to be looking at a time where it was on, not being cranked. Mm-hmm. Which I think is part of the reason why it wasn't that big of a deal. If you looked out, you didn't see it, but you had seen it like a couple of days before,
Yeah.
Joining the crew of this Hesperus was Joseph Moore, who was the NLB keeper. He was the one who was the relief keeper for the Flannan Islands. They sent him just in case anything had gone wrong. They figured, okay, well, he can take over any job that is needed. The Hesperus left port on Christmas Eve, dropped off supplies at a nearby lighthouse, and made her way around the tip of the Eilean Mor on December 26th. Now, 11 days after that lighthouse was first noted as being dark. 11 days had passed, almost 2 weeks.
This is when I remember that, like, we live on such constricted timelines. Like, because 11 days, like, what else were they supposed to do? It wasn't like they were being lackadaisical about it. There was a storm. They couldn't send a ship. They sent a ship. The ship had to drop the stuff off because, like, of course, they're not going to, Anyway, we just, expect things so quickly. And things used to take a long time.
And I think the thing, too, is it wasn't necessarily an emergency. Like, there wasn't any reason to believe that there was any super emergency. I think most people were thinking, man, new lighthouse, something went wrong with the light. They're probably trying to do repairs, you know?
I'm also wondering, sorry, really quickly, I want to focus on the guy who's supposed to be checking on it because, like, he didn't report it off that night, but they're missing. It would have continued to have been off, which maybe this is the Christmas thing, like people weren't checking or something.
Exactly.
But, like, you would have thought, like, oh, it got reported out, like, on the 18th. Oh, let's check it again. Like, let's call up the guy who's supposed to check, and he would check, and it wouldn't be on. Still, you know what I mean? Right. I don't know. I'm like, I feel like some steps were missed in this process. Anyway.
A little too casual for it feels the circumstances.
It does feel a little casual. Okay.
So as the Hesperus pulled up to the docks at Flannan Islands, they blew their horn, they shot off a signal flare, which is standard for, hey, here we come. But there was no response from the lighthouse. Captain Harvey also noted that the lighthouse's flag wasn't flying, which is normally what they would do to signal to a ship, oh, hey, you know, you're clear to dock, come on. So that bothered him, and Captain Harvey ordered his men to come ashore and investigate. And Moore, the relief keeper, led their search party because he knew where he was going. Upon landing, Moore found the gate to the lighthouse closed. Beyond that, the door to the kitchen and supply room was closed, but it was not locked. The inner door connecting the supply room and the kitchen was open. Their stove hadn't been lit for several days. The men's beds were as they had been left, but there was no sign of Ducat, Marshall, or MacArthur. Keith McCloskey describes the apartment.
The empty rooms, the fire gone out, all the clocks stopped, the light itself not working, which provided an eerie aspect to the tale, as if the men had been there 1 minute and vanished into thin air the next.
So there was nothing amiss in the living quarters or with the light, which seemed to function properly. It just hadn't been wound. Moore flipped through Ducat's logbook and found the final entry was December 15th, the same day the Arctur had passed by and noted that the light was unlit. And depending on your source, this is where the mystery starts to deepen. Author Vincent Hayes Gaddis and poet William Wilson Gibson both wrote about this disappearance, noting particularly spooky details. Now, allegedly, their table was set with uneaten meals. There was a chair that was overturned, indicating there was maybe a struggle, or maybe they had to flee the lighthouse quickly. Additionally, Gaddis noted the final entries in the logbook were not written by the principal lighthouse keeper, Ducat, but by Marshall, his assistant. And EJ, you want to give us a dramatic reading of those?
Ooh. Okay. December 12th, gale, north by northwest. Sea lashed to fury, stormbound 9 p.m. Never seen such a storm. Everything shipshape. Ducat irritable. 12 p.m., storm still raging. Wind steady. Stormbound. Cannot go out. Ship passed, sounding foghorn. Could see lights of cabins. Ducat quiet. MacArthur crying. What? Okay, that's me. December 13th. Storm continued through night. Wind shifted west by north. Ducat quiet. MacArthur praying. 12 noon. Gray daylight. Me, Ducat, and MacArthur prayed. December 15th, 1 p.m. Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all. Fucking what? That's so poetic and badass. God is over all. What the fuck?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
And the last 3 days, like, Ducat is freaking out so much that he's not even, like, writing logs. But this is a dude that's been doing this for, like, 20 years. Like, he's never seen a North Sea storm before. Like, I find that hard to believe.
That line, God is over all, sparked a lot of mystery surrounding this disappearance. Because it could be joyous, right? But it's so fucking ominous. Coupled with the mention of these men in like fervent prayer, Ducat's his anger. It paints this troubling few days for these keepers. Did the stress of the storm push one of them too far? Crammed into this tiny little living quarters, unable to leave due to the weather. Did someone play some pranks and the pranks got out of hand? Or was there something more sinister or even supernatural that emerged from the fog and the wind and attacked the isolated keepers? We will find out next time.
The fuck?
Crazy. Am quite taken aback by those final log entries.
Mm-hmm.
They don't make sense. And clear. Yeah, MacArthur's crying. Clearly something has gone awry. It's very unclear what. If I was gonna just automatically off the top of my head from this, it feels to me like Ducat, their fearless leader, lost it for some reason. Maybe this had been brewing for a while and no one knew. I don't know. But it sounds like he was having some sort of mental breakdown. The other guy couldn't handle it, the occasional guy, which makes sense. He's brand new. And then he's out here in this storm. He's probably terrified because it's probably his first time being out there. And the guy that's supposed to be experienced is freaking out. And then this poor middle guy is I guess I'm going to try to hold it together.
Yeah.
And write our little entries.
Yeah, take over as the only one who has sense.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But he didn't even make it.
Right.
I know.
Yeah, and there was nobody. Overturned chairs, uneaten meals.
But do we know the uneaten
food?
No, do we know the uneaten meals is a thing, or is that made up?
Oh, well, we'll have to find out next time.
Okay.
You really got us, Matt.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to watch The Lighthouse between our episodes, please do.
Yeah, I recommend it.
It's great.
It's a great movie. It'll give you some good. First off, it's just a phenomenal movie, but it'll give you some real context to the craziness of being out there and how crazy it can drive you, I think. Yeah.
Not that all lighthouse keepers are crazy. Not saying that. Just saying.
We love you, lighthouse keepers.
We love you, lighthouse keepers. But I think it's obviously a horror movie. It's obviously fantastical in nature. And there is a supernatural element in it, which is pretty cool at the end.
Yeah, well, and then next time we are going to talk about some of the supernatural and the cryptid elements that factor into this story. And became rumors and speculation and all that good stuff. And then we'll also talk about what I think is the most likely scenario for what happened to those guys. Well, thank you all so much for listening. If you are feeling generous, head over to slayingmonsterspodcast.com, click on the Support Us button at the top of the page, and consider leaving a donation or becoming one of our supporters there. That's also where you can find our merch store if you want to wear some Slaying Monsters gear. And until next time, be safe out there.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Slaying Monsters, the 40 in History podcast. If you like the podcast, there's a couple ways you can show your support. You can tell your friends, you can leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform, or you can head over to slayingmonsterspodcast.com and click on the Support Us button to leave a donation. For questions, suggestions, and other feedback, reach out to us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, and stay up to date by following us on socials at Slaying Monsters Podcast. Your support helps us grow, and we are truly grateful to have our listeners and community.